I'm Mark from Valor XL. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'd like to talk to you about the importance of creating your own nonprofit narrative. Now, if you're the owner and operator of a nonprofit, this might be something you've never really thought about before. And sometimes I think that tends to be the case. It doesn't really come into play until it's needed. And then suddenly you might find yourself scrambling, trying to tell somebody else in a relevant way what it is you do and how well you're doing it. But a nonprofit narrative is something you should always be thinking about and be very intentional in pursuing. If you saw the recent installment of Valor XL where we talked about telling the story of your organization, that was a slightly different take. In that episode, we were talking about how you can actually consider writing a book to describe for others the steps that you've taken in developing your nonprofit or your small business. You may only be 4 or 5 steps along the journey and feel like you still have so much to learn, but for somebody else just starting out, you already look like an expert, and it can be really beneficial to put in a written form how you've already done what you've done so that others can avoid pitfalls and mistakes and make a lot faster progress. But that's not what we're talking about today. A narrative for your nonprofit is specifically crafted for people outside of your organization who do have a vested interest in what you're doing. And more often than not, that translates into funders, whether it's a potential donor or a grant that you need to write a narrative for. Especially with grants, since that is such a highly competitive area where many other agencies and organizations are vying for those same funds, you need to be able to relay the story of what you're doing in a compelling way that sets you aside from everybody else and really differentiates you and makes you look like the worthy candidate to receive that funding. It really comes down to being able to analyze what you're doing, and at its most fundamental level, that's all about outcome tracking. Now, that may sound clinical and very boring, but outcome tracking is an eye-opener because if you track outcomes, you will automatically have a very clear picture of how well you're fulfilling the mission that you were created to fulfill in the first place. And outcome tracking is something that can be done in a myriad of ways. You can actually use a customer relationship management software. They can run the gamut from very inexpensive to extremely expensive with many bells and whistles, or you can use something as humble and basic as an Excel spreadsheet. It's really about looking at each client that you serve and asking yourself, what did that person come to me for? Was I able to serve them? And if I wasn't, why? Now, even if you just do something in an Excel spreadsheet, you can report basic demographics for each one of the people you served, and then you can indicate in a very simple way what services they sought, what services they received, and describe other outcomes that by doing a basic filtering will give you a clear picture of the types of people you served during the year. Were there certain things that people came to you for and you weren't able to provide? Many questions come up when you start looking at outcomes. And today I'd like to talk about 4 very basic things to keep in mind when you are looking at the outcomes of your organization. You always need to be gauging what you're doing, but it's also very important to look at things from the perspective of how well you've performed over the last year. Now, this is being recorded at the end of 2022. Maybe in your organization, your fiscal year and the calendar year align. Maybe your fiscal year falls in the middle of the year. It doesn't really matter. You just need to be able to relay to someone else how well you did over the last 12 months. And that's where outcome tracking really comes into play. And so I'd like to talk right now about the 4 questions that you need to ask yourself in order to create your own narrative. Number 1, who were your clients? Now, again, that's about as simple as it gets, but you need to be able to look and see, who did you serve? I talked a little bit about capturing basic demographics. This can be something that's crucial depending on the type of grant that you're seeking. Some grants, particularly if they're funded by HUD, may want to serve particular segments of the community. And that's where capturing client demographics really comes into play, because you need to be able to justify your seeking those funds by indicating that you already are serving that particular demographic. Looking at the clients you served can tell you many things. It not only can identify particular segments of society, but age groups. And it can also tell you whether or not family members are benefiting from the services that you're providing. All of these factors go together to not only give you a better understanding of what you're doing, but to translate across so that others outside of your organization can look at you and see what the true nature of your service is. Number two, what services did you provide? That can seem like an obvious question to ask, but it sometimes gets a little more complicated. We tend to think that if a client seeks us out for a particular service and we're able to provide it to them, that that's where the story ends. But sometimes that's just where it begins. You need to really make sure that you're intentional about having detailed documentation of every single interaction with your clients. They may come to you for whatever your big ticket item is, but there might be 5 other smaller things that you provide for them that really, when you look at it, are equally important because they all go together. Doing more than just what someone sought you out for is a good indication to outside eyes of just how credible your organization really is. It shows that you care about adding value when you provide service to your clients. So make sure that you are somehow documenting all of those things. They might seem very slight, but they really do go together in a cumulative way that makes a really powerful narrative of just how much you do care. Number 3, what services didn't you provide and why didn't you? Now, this may seem like an odd one. Depending on your programs or the way the policies of your organization are structured, you may have specific guidelines that govern eligibility for receiving services. If you just indicate that someone came to you for a particular service and you didn't provide that service, you're really not telling the whole story. And to an outsider, that can look like somehow your organization dropped the ball. Someone came to you in need and you failed to meet that need. But it is a lot more nuanced than that. If you didn't serve the person, there has to be a valid reason why. And again, it could come down to some sort of program eligibility. So make sure that you document that in great detail, because the one thing you never want is for an outside entity to think that you are somehow playing favorites. Favoritism will kill the credibility of your organization. You need to make absolutely sure that all of your policies and procedures specifically address treating every single client exactly the same, which means that everyone must meet the same eligibility requirements, and if they fail to do so, you can provide documented justification as to why you were not able to provide the service to them. Sometimes to facilitate this, it can be really helpful to develop a matrix that can give you rationale behind those judgment calls so that it's not up to an individual's opinion, but again, always following a precedent and ensuring that things are done with consistency. And number 4, what trends did you observe? When you start looking at client outcomes, the one thing that will become patently obvious to you is that there are many trends to observe. You'll notice that there are certain demographics that you might serve more than others. Sometimes there may be situations where outside forces come into play. You may be in a geographical area that has severe winter weather, and you may notice that statistically fewer people seek your services during those cold winter months. You may have program eligibility requirements that cause the client to have to fulfill certain obligations to be eligible for a service, and you may see that in situations where there is perhaps a single mother with 2 or 3 kids, that it's very difficult for them to do so. What's great about trend analysis is it's like shining a big flashlight on your entire organization. It's a great way to spot deficiencies in your process, to see if there are holes somewhere. But on a positive side, it can also be an eye-opener as to new possibilities. You may discover through looking at trends that many people come to your organization each year hoping to receive a particular service, and it happens to be one that at this moment in time you're not currently providing. But it may be completely feasible to pursue that in the future, and embracing things like that will help you to grow and develop as an organization and also to serve your clients better. Well, as you can see, outcomes really are important, and being able to distill them into a narrative is one of the best things you can ever do for your organization. You obviously care about what you're doing, or you wouldn't be doing it, so make sure that you're able to translate that in a way for outsiders to know and appreciate. It does really need to resonate with whoever is reading your narrative. They need to really get a glimpse into the inner workings of what you do so that they will be willing to come on board and support you in whatever way they can. Well, I hope that this was helpful for you today, but maybe in your nonprofit or even your small business, you're not sure if you're on a good trajectory. Maybe you don't really know what direction you're heading in. Well, I'd like to offer you a great resource. If you click on the link in the description below this video, you can download a free PDF called Taking Your Organization's Temperature. It consists of 30 statements about the health of your organization. Go through and rank how each one of the possible responses applies to your organization. There's a corresponding numeric value for each, and when you tally them up at the end, you'll see whether or not the approach you've been taking is inactive, reactive, or proactive. If this was beneficial for you, would you please give us a like? And in the comments below, please let me know, have you ever had to compose a narrative about your nonprofit? And if so, what challenges did you face in doing that? I'd also like to invite you to subscribe to this channel. We have new content on a regular basis, and all of it is specifically tailored for nonprofits and small businesses. I'd like to thank you so much for joining me today. I hope it helped you on your journey to organizational success. Please come back again next time. Until then, remember, at Valor Excel, we're committed to helping you do smart work. I'll see you next time. Goodbye for now.